Hi, welcome to Off the Page. I'm Leslie Choice. My guest today is Claire Mowat. Claire's written about life in an outport in Newfoundland, and she's also written books for young readers, the latest of which is called Last Summer in Louisbourg. Welcome, Claire.
Nice to be here, Leslie.
You spend a big chunk of your year living in River Bourgeois in Cape Breton, and in this novel you write about a place not too far down the road from there. Why did you decide to write a story that involved the historical Fortress of Louisbourg?
Well, I love the Fortress of Louisbourg. For people who haven't seen it, it sits at the east end of Cape Breton Island, and it's a recreation of a real community that was there and was destroyed progressively from 1744 to 1780 something, when the British demolished it. And of course, it's an animated fortress. When you go there, there are people baking bread and people sewing and people running houses and restaurants.
This whole recreation of things as they were.
Yes, yeah. It's a fascinating place. If anybody out there has not seen it, they should. And one of the things they have are a coterie of little children from age 5 to age 12 who are dressed in period clothes, and they just run around. And of course, it does look like a real place when you see little kids running around, just playing games and doing the things children do. So, you know, when I had seen this place, I've been there many times, I thought, what a great thing for a contemporary child to be doing. I'd love to have worked there if I'd had the chance when I was young. And I also wondered how it was that children could be working there, because you're not allowed to employ anybody under the age of 15, I think it is. Mm-hmm. Turns out they're volunteers. But there is an administrative staff of slightly older young ladies who help with these children.
So your imagination kicks in.
Yes,
and thinks,
I thought, now there's the perfect summer job.
Yeah.
And I also heard about a movie being made there. More than one movie has been made there because of the authenticity of the buildings. And I thought, wow, hey, a bit part in a movie when you're a teenage girl. So that's what got the whole story, you know, kindling away in my mind.
Do you, when you write a YA novel, do you go back to yourself at that particular age, or do you instead watch kids around you today, or come up with some kind of amalgamation of the two together?
It's an amalgamation,
mm-hmm.
But I think probably in the last analysis, anybody who's my age, who's writing for young readers, is bringing something,
sure,
dredging things out of the dim and distant past of my own reactions when I was that age.
And is it good to be there, to go back and to be that age again, at least while you're writing the story?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm not sugarcoating the life of a 15-year-old. It's full of anguish and disappointments and terrible things.
And life isn't when you get older?
Well, actually, not quite as much.
No, not the same way. No, you're right.
No, once you get past those awful teenage hurdles, those turbulent years, you're more in control after that. And I think that makes quite a difference. But when you're 13 or 14, you're not. Other people, parents, teachers, the whole system is controlling you.
And that's probably why it's an interesting age to be writing about, because you have that kind of turmoil and that kind of conflict.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about Louisbourg. It's, you know, something about the history of the place that you know.
Well, I would say it's probably one of the biggest follies of the King of France of the day to try to build on this promontory of land, this windswept peninsula, a French village. That's what they did do. I mean,
take a chunk of France and move it over to Cape Breton and try to recreate it exactly the same way. A lot of things went wrong, I guess.
Oh, just about
unbelievable.
Just about everything went wrong.
Yeah.
In the first place, anybody who's been in that part of Cape Breton knows the fog is an everyday occurrence. Most of the, well, I shouldn't say that. They do have some nice weather too.
Yeah.
But as a military post where you would be looking out to sea for other ships who were going to take away what you claimed to be yours, you couldn't see a lot of the time.
Not a good place to build a fortress.
No, not good.
And rocky shoreline and all kinds of dangers around.
Yes, and also not very good agricultural land, because the grazing of animals was always a concern, and it's not good pasture land up there. It's forest, which meant they had to chop down a lot of trees, and that's a lot of hard work too.
And then there were the English, of course, causing all kinds of trouble because they wanted this territory like the French did.
Yes, and in the end they took it by blasting the fortress to pieces several times. And then, of course, the French settlers of Cape Breton and all over eastern Canada had to relocate. That's not the Acadian expulsion, that's a different kind of relocation, and they did. They relocated to other parts of Cape Breton Island, and, well, it's a long, complicated story, but they could no longer stay in that fortress.
Right.
It must have been a very smug, nice place to live for the 50 or so years that it was, well, not quite 50, but for more than one generation.
And very much within the confines of that stone wall.
Yeah.
The life of that community. Now, they brought over everything from France, including vast supplies of wines and stuff, I gather.
Yes.
But they also brought along religion as well. The Catholic Church would have been a very powerful force there. What was the religious life like in Louisbourg, do you think?
Well, I think fairly strict. I mean, everybody was Catholic, and there was a chapel there. Well, there is a recreated chapel there now. Yes. Quite beautiful.
Stained glass windows in the whole bit?
Yeah,
just like in
beautiful
France.
Building with beautiful pulpit, carved wood, and it's quite lovely. So that was part of the daily, weekly rituals of people's lives, as it would have been had they stayed in France.
Yeah, so there really wasn't much integration into life in a new world.
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
The indigenous people, Mi'kmaq, I still have trouble with the new pronunciation of that. What we used to call Micmacs and are now Mi'kmaq, those people were around, but I don't think that they had any real participation in the fortress. There may have been some trading going on, you know, with fish and possibly firewood, that sort of thing, but they were living as if on a desert island almost.
Which is an interesting contrast to the Acadians, who of course were also French, but in different parts of what's now the province of Nova Scotia. And the Acadians were very much becoming part of the land and part of the communities of Micmac people and things like that. So
yeah, well, they were settlers. Most of the people in the fortress, of course, were military career people and their wives and children.
Right.
No, settlers were living a very different life down in the Annapolis region.
Yeah.
Probably a better life because it was a little more tuned to nature.
Sounds like it.
But in the end, a great many of them had to leave after the 1755 expulsion.
That's right, because of that massive conflict between the British and the French. Back to your novel here. That's good. I wanted to get a little bit of historical context because Louisbourg obviously plays a big part in it. Your protagonist, Andrea, what is she doing there? How does she get to Louisbourg? And of course, this is modern day, isn't it? This isn't back in the centuries.
Yes, of course. I'm bringing history into it, but it's a contemporary story. She gets a summer job there because she won one of 12 prizes in a history essay contest.
Yes.
Now, I invented this contest. It doesn't exist, but I think it's a very good idea.
Oh, maybe somebody should invent it in the real world then. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I have Parks Canada as the sponsor. But of course, I feel very strongly about history. You know, the current trend is to not teach history to Canadians. Just let us all believe we emerged full-blown out of nowhere.
How did that happen?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been reading a lot of reasons for it. One is the corporate takeover of our system. The corporations don't want us to be nationalists. Otherwise, we might rebel against the corporate rule and want to go back to being a nation state.
Ooh, that's pretty scary. And if we're bringing businesses into schools with computers and privately constructed public education and all that sort of stuff, you think that history might actually be diminished by those factors?
Oh, it is. It is a fact. There's far less history taught than when I went to school or you. They don't want us to know about our history because it's going to make us stand up and say, hey, why am I taking this BS from these people? I'm a Canadian because of this, this, and this, and this. They'd rather we just globalize, homogenize.
How do we counter that?
Read my book. It's full of history, Canadian history. Well, not just my book, lots of books. But anyway, I do want to make the point in the book that as Andrea works there, having written this historical essay, not about Louisbourg, by the way, she wrote about the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, but she won a contest and was awarded a summer job with Parks Canada, and she chose that particular place to be. She might have chosen Banff National Park or Riding Mountain in Manitoba, or the many, many places to work in the Parks Canada system. But because this place has so much history in it, I wanted to make the point so I could weave history through the book.
Does the place change her in some way? I know she meets people and various things happen, but is there something that begins to change her because of the relationship with this very historical place?
Well, her best friend is an Acadian, and that's she wouldn't have made that sort of friend had she continued to spend her life in Trillium Woods, Ontario, the fictitious town that I invented for her. She falls in love with a guy, but he's from Alabama. He's part of the film crew who are making the film. And as usual, falling in love at 15, it doesn't end very happily.
It's a tough one. Yeah.
It's a toughie, yeah. But I just wanted to bring that in the story too.
So how does she change during the course of the story and her experiences there? Does she become older, more mature, more sensible, or something different?
I think so. I think when you're 15, every few months of your life adds another dimension to your own persona. Yeah, she's very much impressed by the look of the place and imagining herself living there in 1744. Trying to picture her own life then, how different it would be in a world where there were no television sets, no videos, no magazines, not even any books.
Right.
Only the very wealthy children were educated and learned to read then. She muses on the differences between a young person living now and one living then.
In this novel, Last Summer in Louisbourg, and also in Girl from Away, of course, you're talking about a main character who in some ways is very much an outsider, going from one place familiar to some place that's unfamiliar. Is that a little bit of you ending up in Cape Breton, or perhaps some other element in your life, moving to an output in Newfoundland, that sort of thing?
I think there is that too. But I think so many kids are outsiders now. In my fictitious trilogy here, she is growing up in Toronto or near Toronto with a Newfoundland-born mother. Well, she did have a Newfoundland-born father, but he died and her mother married again, and so she has a stepfather. But this is very typical of the way an awful lot of kids are growing up, with a step-parent, with parents who didn't come from the place in which they find themselves living. I think that's more the norm than the fortunate young people who happen to be born in River Bourgeois and grow up and go to school there and live their lives there. I envy anybody who can do that. Because I came from a city and my parents were not born in that city either. So I'm addressing that feeling of a lot of adolescent people who are
we feel
wondering,
uprooted, or we move on to places we're unfamiliar with and have to adapt.
Exactly, who am I? Why is it I've never met any grandparent? Because they're all living in, I don't know, Hong Kong or Bosnia or someplace.
Yeah.
And even why is it my mother doesn't speak the language very well that all my friends speak? And that kind of thing is very real.
What would you like your readers, and what age group precisely here are you writing for?
Well, young adults starts anywhere. Well, it's whenever a young person is able to read a book for herself or himself.
That's right, and you tend to be reading about kids who are older than you generally.
Yes,
that
of
kind
course.
Of age. What's the one thing you'd like one of those readers to say to you after they've read the book? I mean, people will come up and say, I really love the book, I like the book, all that kind of stuff. But what would you love to hear from someone based on a reading of your book that they got from it?
I suppose that they were enlightened a bit and entertained. That's what I'm trying to do.
Two big ones.
Yeah.
My guest today is Claire Mowat. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this. Hi, welcome back to Off the Page. My guest today is Claire Mowat, author of young adult novels like Last Summer in Louisbourg. Claire, when you were growing up, what books were you reading that were changing your life?
Oh, I wish I could answer that. I didn't read an awful lot.
Well, that's interesting. Why? How did that happen?
Well, you know, my big interest in life was drawing and painting. I thought I was going to be a painter or a designer. And all the hours that you perhaps spent reading, I was drawing.
What were you drawing pictures of?
Oh, goodness knows. I wrote my own comic strips, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So did Lynn Johnston, but she went on to bigger and better things. I studied at an art college, graduated from that.
What were you going to be? This was taking you into a career of art, a painter?
A designer, I
designer?
thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then along the way, I married Farley, and he took me off to all these strange places. And I still thought I would go on painting, but what happened as the years went by is that I started to write, mostly to aid and abet him. I started keeping journal notes and answering mail, and it went on, and my little scanty journal notes became extensive journal notes. And finally, one day he said, "You can write your own book." Anyway, that's to make a long story short. So I wasn't doing an enormous amount of reading, and I cannot tell you any one book that I ever read, or even 2 or 3, that changed my life.
That's interesting, yeah.
Maybe this is a good thing.
You rediscovered literature later on.
So those parents out there who have kids who don't read anything, don't give up. Because maybe later on they will read a lot and even go on and write books.
And what were your dreams and aspirations when you were back around the same age as your character here?
Oh, I suppose to marry a handsome, wonderful man and live happily ever after.
Then it worked out, right? You married Farley Mowat. There you are.
Oh yeah. Well, and of course, to be some kind of a designer was part of the story too. But I think girls at that age are very, very romantic. They're not hard-edged in thinking of careers. That comes a little later.
Yes. Yeah, where'd you grow up? You were a city kid?
Toronto.
In the city?
I was born there, born and raised there. I left there a very long time ago. It doesn't feel like home anymore, but it's a familiar city.
Your first book was written out of your experience of living in Outport in Newfoundland?
Yes, yes.
How did that change you?
Oh, that changed me altogether. Oh, that really was my education.
This was a fairly remote port, south coast of Newfoundland, wasn't it?
Yeah, Burgeo.
Burgeo.
It had no road. We had to go in by ship, once a week east, once a week west. When we were in there, we were there. We had no telephones even. We had a telegraph that was shut off at 6 p.m. every day and all day Sunday. And there were all these people who were not accustomed to living with the whole world as I had been. They lived with one another in a very different manner than I had understood growing up in a city.
Was that attractive to you, or
yes,
were you excluded as, again, being the outsider?
I was excluded to some extent, but it didn't stop me being there and noticing the way they lived. And I was envious of them. I still am. Anybody who can live in a self-contained way like that and not be totally swayed by something that's going on in Texas or California or France. I know it's insular and people would criticize the insularity of it, but it had a protection, a sense of humor that existed in the place because everybody knew everybody. It was a revelation.
That's something that's lacking in many communities, especially in transient communities or in urban communities, is that tight-knitted feeling that you have with other people. But of course, there's limitations of that as well, which you've written about and Farley's written about of the small community as well. But it's part of that experience that sounds like it turned you into a writer.
Yes, it did. Well, I had a lot of time, for one thing.
Yes.
I wasn't frittering my time away at the shopping mall or a television set. I had a lot of time. And so I started to write.
And what you wrote was a very personal book, I found. And you're writing about people that you knew. That almost seems like dangerous territory to start writing about personal things and writing about your neighbors as such. Did you get any flack for that?
I did to some extent. Don't forget, I fictionalized all their names. I call it a fictional
Yes,
memoir.
but if you went back to the town, people could figure out who was who, I think.
Oh, I gather they
Yeah.
have spent a lot of time doing that.
Right.
So I'm told.
Yeah. But then why would you want to do that? Revealing something about the life there, taking on a kind of a danger, almost a kind of an intrusion, someone might say.
Yes, they could
into-
say that.
Yeah.
But I felt that people beyond that wonderful, supportive world ought to understand what it was about. Don't forget, this was the age when a great many Newfoundlanders were migrating to Ontario and being called goofy Newfies and a lot of things that upset me very much. So I thought, I'm going to tell them up there in the rest of Canada what it is like. That these are not impoverished people. These are people who are living a very rich life. I just was determined to do that. And I guess that is what made me a writer, was the
Yes.
determination to tell that story.
I think that came across in the book too, very much. Now that you're writing young adult novels and you're connecting with kids that age and you're trying to give some insight into the past and that sort of thing. We have a kind of mythology about kids being different today from they were in the way they were in the past. You know, life being so much more complicated and sophisticated and so many more dangers. Do you see it that way, or are kids still very much kids and they're encountering the same kind of problems with just different guises?
Yeah. Well, I think their surroundings are so different. I don't think kids are any different. I mean, inside themselves, they're the same as they were 1,000 years ago. They are still young adults trying to figure out how they're going to live when they are fully grown and find their place in the world in which they live. But now, my God, all these bewildering machines they have to run, and I just find that very hard. And the isolation one from the other. I mean, all these kids with all their wired up earphones and sound systems, and I find that very spooky that they're not talking to one another when you see them on public transportation. I think they're missing out a great deal.
Now, your book is not a book of advice, obviously, but if you had some advice to give to the kids that you're talking about, the teenagers, the young teenagers, what would you say to them?
Oh boy. I would wish that they could get together in groups somehow, whether it's summer jobs in a place like that or summer camps, or just get together in groups without all the wires and all the machines. Just get away from all that and get acquainted with one another.
Do you think it's possible for books to still even have an impact up against television and music videos and the internet and email and all those wires that you speak of?
Yes, I do. I do, because reading is a very private experience, and it can take place anywhere, you know, sitting under an oak tree on a summer's day, sitting on an airplane. Books are portable and they're lasting. I think they'll be with us for a very long time, and they will affect people, yes.
Okay. We're going to take a short break and come back with our guest, Claire Mowat. My guest today has been Claire Mowat. We've been talking about young adult novels and about kids and reading and things. Characters in your books tend to travel a bit. I know you've traveled hither and yon with Farley. How does travel change a person, especially a young individual who gets out there away from home?
Well, it can change them for the better. Travel is part of life, and I suppose people need to get used to it when they're young.
Claire, thanks very much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
And thanks for watching Off the Page. I'm Leslie Choice, and I hope to see you again.